you are subjected to, challenged by, bored by, blessed by, offended by, and perhaps several other things by what you hear from this free pulpit on a given Sunday. However, the truth is, the most effective sermons are preached during the week, far away from the sanctuaries of our churches, by those who are not professional preachers, ministers, but those who take seriously what it means to be a follower of Jesus. The fact is, every single one of us in this room is a witness. But two questions that we answer with our lives. To whom do we witness? And what kind of witness are we? I'm reminded of a story that I read some time ago. An Amish farmer was asked, "Are you a Christian?" He paused, pointed to his neighbor's house and said, "You'll have to ask him." Loving our neighbor, being a witness to our neighbor, is more than just a warm, fuzzy feeling or the words that we say. It's a tangible, definable interaction with our actual neighbors. What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. It's also the realization that Jesus asks you and me the question, are you a neighbor? You remember the story of the lawyer that came to Jesus and asked what the greatest commandment is. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, might, and your neighbor as yourself. And thinking to be really bright, the lawyer says, well, who's my neighbor? Good question, I thought. And so Jesus proceeds to tell the story of the Good Samaritan. Remember, the senior minister comes by first and says, I won't have anything to do with this fellow beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. I'll go on the other. And the associate minister, guess what? Do exactly the same thing. But then comes an undocumented immigrant living on the margins. And he takes this beaten up, left for dead man to the emergency department and pays out of pocket for his care. And you know the question Jesus asked the lawyer? In this story that I've just told you, who is the neighbor? The undocumented immigrant. You see, if somebody is breathing, they are our neighbor. The question is not, who is my neighbor? The question is, are you and I neighbors? Are we neighborly? For we are witnesses every single day to the way we treat each other, our families, our co-workers, how we use the financial resources that we have. And more often than not, it's the small things. It's the small things. This morning in our text that Carla read to us, we learn about one of the earliest witnesses, evangelists, if you will, good news givers. This person seems to have been an ordinary person, one of the original 12 disciples. His name appears only a few times in the Bible, in fact, in 12 verses, and most of those are simply a listing of the disciples, except for the scripture today. This person never in the headlines, but makes a difference in human history. Scripture is full of people like that. Charlotte, North Carolina is full of people like that. Never in the headlines, never in the spotlight, never gain attention of the world, yet they play a crucial role in God's great plan and purpose. The person in our scripture today, Andrew. A behind-the-scenes person, if there ever was one. His only claim to fame is that he brought his brother Simon to Jesus. It must have been wearisome to always be the second banana, always being, oh, you're Simon Peter's brother. When I was in college, I preached one weekend in the little town of Humboldt, Kansas. You've never heard of it. I met an attractive young woman there that I dated for a while. Come to find out, she was the sister of Deborah Barnes, who was Miss America in 1968. Well, that's a big deal, folks, for Kansas, which is flyover country. And she admitted that it was wearisome to only and basically and eternally be known as, oh, you're Miss America's sister. Perhaps Andrew felt the same. Not really glamorous to be identified as someone, something other, a brother, sister, husband, except for one little thing. What would have happened to Simon Peter had Andrew not introduced his brother to Jesus? If Andrew had not done that, then the whole history of the church would have been radically different, and you and I might not have been here today. This church may very well not have existed at all. According to what Carla read to us, as soon as Andrew realizes, oh, this is the Messiah, this is the one we've been waiting for, he immediately goes to Simon, and says, I found the Messiah, and brings him to Jesus. That simple act was the beginning of one of the most strategic relationships that Jesus had with anyone on earth. What would have happened in our world had that not happened? The whole point of this is that every single one of us in this room have a part to play in God's great design, in God's drama. We may not have the leading role. We may not have the starring role. Our name may not be on the marquee out front. It might not be a role that gets a whole lot of attention, but without that, the whole drama looks different, and parts of it won't happen at all. For every Simon Peter out there, there are many Andrews in the background. And they set about taking their friends, their co-workers, their brothers, their sisters, and introducing them to this Jesus. Not merely by their words, once again, but by what they embody, the way they live out the gospel in their lives. Were it not for the Andrews of the world, once again, there would be no Simon Peters. November the 9th, 1989, will be remembered as one of the great days in the 20th century. I remember watching it on TV, just mesmerized by it. That was the day that the Berlin Wall came down. Soon after that, a number of the Eastern Bloc countries began to experience more freedom, countries behind what we used to call the Iron Curtain. And the history of humankind was changed. How in the world did that happen? I remember Ronald Reagan standing at the Berlin Wall and saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, take this wall down." I thought, yeah, in my lifetime it'll never happen. And you thought the same thing if you're old enough to remember that. What happened? How did that come about? Well, immediately one is drawn to the country of Poland and to the courageous stand that those citizens took in the face of the Soviet system, the oppressive Soviet system. And where did that originate? Where did that come from? You may remember there was an industrial worker, a seemingly insignificant man by the name of Lech Walesa. He rose to international fame in August of 1980 as the leader of the independent trade union Solidarity in Poland, which played a decisive role in bringing down communism, not only in Poland, but throughout Eastern and Central Europe. Well, that's nice, but where did Lech Walesa get his impetus to do what he did? Where did he get that inspiration? If you know anything about Walesa's life, you'll know that some of his inspiration came from the life and work of an Alabama preacher by the name of Martin Luther King Jr., who dared to stand up, pay the price, even give his own life for the civil rights of all God's human creatures. It was from Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday we observe tomorrow, that Lech Walesa learned much about nonviolence as a way of confronting coercive, destructive, dehumanizing evil in our world. Well, that's nice. But where did Martin Luther King Jr. get the impetus to do what he did, to get involved in the civil rights, to lead the civil rights movement? Well, as you may know, it was an insignificant little black lady who was a seamstress in Montgomery, Alabama. A woman who at the end of her workday on December the 1st, 1955, boarded the bus for her journey home, and when the bus driver said, "You got to get up out of that seat and go to the rear of the bus where you belong," she said, "No, no." And the Montgomery bus boycott ensued. And as she wrote in her book, Rosa Parks, My Stories, people always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true. I wasn't tired physically, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me as being old. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in. Tired of giving in. It was the courage of Rosa Lee Parks that inspired Martin Luther King Jr. to get involved in the fledgling civil rights movement, and Lech Walesa, in turn, the other Eastern Bloc nations, which ultimately led to the falling of the Berlin Wall. Well, that's nice. That's a good story. But where did Rosa Parks, where did she get what it took to refuse to go to the back of the bus and sit? Well, the answer's found in a little white frame church on a dusty country road back in rural Alabama. In the early 20th century, a black Sunday school teacher in her late 70s, it was at the Mount Zion AME Church in Pine Level, Alabama. She told the little girls in her class, including Rosalie Macaulay Parks, that they were God's children, and according to Psalm 9, they were created a little lower than the angels, and they were crowned with honor and glory. She taught them that they counted and that they should never let anyone take away from them their basic dignity as a human being. Isn't that incredible? To think that the collapse of the Berlin Wall finds at least some of its roots back in a Sunday school class in rural Alabama in the early part of the 20th century. Isn't it amazing what God can and does do? This God continues to work in and through history with those who lead our spiritual growth classes, our Sunday school teachers, other workers, using the Andrews of this world to set the world on its head. Who would have thought? Who would have ever thought that a little Sunday school teacher in rural Alabama would have influence that helped change the world? Why can't we understand this? I think it's because we confuse size with significance. Because we cannot do everything, or at least the big things in our estimation, we begin thinking that we can do nothing. But little things done faithfully can change the world. And so today we remember Andrew and an elderly Sunday school teacher in the back roads of early 20th century Alabama. God calls us to faithfulness. Consider Andrew, who brought his brother. Look at a Sunday school teacher in Alabama. You and I are not called to be brilliant, beautiful, famous, wealthy, successful. By the grace of God, you and I are called to be faithful, even in the small things. How about it, you Andrews? How about it?